the confessional door slammed shut like a gunshot in the empty chapel, and Sister Camilla's whispered plea, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. At 13, Belle pressed her ear to the wooden lattice, her small fingers gripping the edge until her knuckles whitened, heart pounding as she heard the name that shattered her world. Elena. Not God, not the Virgin Mary, but Elena, the soft-spoken widow from the parish bake sales, whose laughter always lingered a beat too long when Camilla blessed her at Massachusetts. In that stolen moment, Belle's innocence cracked open, revealing the secret her sainted mother had buried deeper than any rosary bead. Belle Vargas never forgot the scent of incense and polished oak that clung to her clothes that humid August evening in 2013. Taos, New Mexico, the high desert town where the Sangre de Cristo Mountains cradled the sky like a reluctant lover, felt worlds away from the glossy postcards of American freedom her schoolbooks promised. Here, in the shadow of the San Francisco de Asís Mission Church, life moved to the rhythm of vespers and vigils, and Camilla Ruiz was its unyielding conductor. Adopted at 6 from a crumbling foster system in Albuquerque, Belle had grown up trailing her mother's habit like a shadow, learning to fold linens for the altar and recite the act of contrition before she could tie her own shoes. Camilla wasn't just her mother, she was the parish's North Star, a 35-year-old widow who'd lost her husband to a border crossing accident, only to channel her grief into a vow of service that elevated her from grieving parishioner to Sister Camilla, the unofficial saint of the Southwest. But saints, Belle learned that night, had feet of clay dusted with the red earth of hidden desires. She'd snuck into the church after curfew, a habit born of adolescent rebellion, her sneakers silent on the terracotta tiles. The confessional's dim glow drew her like a moth. Camilla's voice, usually a melody of sermons on forgiveness, cracked with something raw, something forbidden. "It's her eyes, Father. They undo me every time." Belle's breath caught. Elena Morales, the woman with the garden of heirloom roses and a smile that warmed like chamomile tea, wasn't just a friend. The words tumbled out in hushed Spanish. "Te amo más que a mi propia alma." I love you more than my own soul. Belle fled into the night, the mountains silhouetted against a star-pricked sky, her 13-year-old mind reeling. Was this the sin that could damn them both? Camilla, who led youth groups with stories of Mary's unwavering faith, who bandaged Belle's scraped knees with prayers instead of peroxide. The woman the town called La Santa for her tireless charity drives and midnight visits to the sick. How could she harbor this? And why did Belle's chest ache not with disgust, but with a fierce protective ache she couldn't name? By morning the secret festered like a thorn in her palm. Breakfast was arepas and black coffee on their adobe casitas porch, the Rio Pueblo gurgling below like it held all the town's gossip. Camilla, fresh from dawn mass, ruffled Belle's hair, still tangled from sleep, and murmured, "You look troubled, Mija. Dreams again?" Belle forced a nod, shoving down the bile of betrayal. Not betrayal exactly. More like the sudden weight of carrying a world too big for her bony shoulders. School that fall blurred into a haze of algebra and altar boy crushes that felt as foreign as the boys' clumsy compliments. Belle buried herself in sketchbooks, drawing jagged mountains and women with eyes like storm clouds. Camilla's eyes, Elena's eyes, her own. At night she'd lie awake listening to the coyotes howl, piecing together fragments. The way Elena's hand brushed Camilla's during potlucks, the shared glances over tamale steam at fiestas. It wasn't ugly what she'd overheard. It was human, tender even. But in Taos, where the church bells tolled like judgments and the bishop's homilies railed against the snares of the flesh, tenderness like that was a noose. Belle tested the waters once, tentatively. Over dinner, green chili stew simmering on the stove, she blurted. What if loving someone the church says is wrong, isn't wrong at all? Camilla's spoon froze midair, her dark eyes sharpening like a hawk's. Love is never wrong, Belle. But obedience? That's the cross we bear. The words landed heavy, laced with a sorrow Belle recognized from the confessional. She didn't press. Instead she watched. And waited. Years slipped by like sand through the Taos arroyos. Belle bloomed into a lanky 16-year-old with freckles from too many hikes and a scholarship to the University of New Mexico in sight. Camilla's star rose higher. Whispers of a diocesan award for her work with immigrant families, her face on the local gazette under headlines like, Sister Camilla, a beacon in the desert. Elena faded into the background after her husband's passing, moving to Santa Fe for a nursing job. But her ghost lingered in the pressed wildflowers Camilla tucked into prayer books. Belle's own secrets stirred then, tentative and terrifying. At a summer art camp in the Pecos wilderness, she met Sophia, a wiry Chicana painter with tattoos of cacti snaking up her arms and a laugh that echoed off canyon walls. Their first kiss happened under a meteor shower, clumsy and electric, tasting of esmeralda and stolen freedom. Belle pulled back, gasping. This is what she meant. Sophia, all fire and no filters, grinned. Your mom's a nun, right? Explains the guilt trip. Belle laughed, but it hollowed her out. How could she claim this joy when Camilla's love was chained in shadows? She confessed to Camilla that Christmas, the casita aglow with luminarias. Snow dusted the pinyon trees outside, muting the world to a hush. I kissed a girl, Mama, and it felt right. Camilla's face crumpled, not in anger, but in a grief so profound it stole Belle's breath. She pulled her close, whispering into her hair. Then hold it close, me lose. The world will try to take it from you. No lectures on sin, no rosaries pressed into her palm. Just that permission wrapped in pain. Belle clung to her, inhaling the familiar lavender soap, wondering if Camilla mourned her own lost Elena in that embrace. But secrets like desert winds erode the strongest walls. By Belle's senior year, rumors slithered through the parish like sidewinders. An anonymous letter to the bishop, scrawled in block letters. Sister Camilla consorts with the widow. Unnatural affections. The fallout was swift. A sabbatical from duties, whispered investigations. Camilla bore it with the grace of a martyr, her sermons turning to themes of exile and redemption. Belle, now driving her beat-up Ford pickup to school, seethed in silence. At 18, she packed for Albuquerque with a duffel of clothes and a heart armored in defiance. College was a revelation. Queer theory classes in sunlit lecture halls, pride flags fluttering from dorm windows, lovers who held hands without flinching. Belle majored in studio art, her canvases exploding with bold strokes of crimson and gold, mountains birthing rainbows, saints with lovers' lips. She dated sporadically. A poet from El Paso, a barista with a lip ring. But none stuck like the ache of home. Letters from Camilla arrived weekly, postmarked house, filled with parish news and veiled longings. The roses are blooming again. Wish you were here to see them. Graduation came in 2020, amid the chaos of a pandemic that locked the world in masks and Zoom screens. Belle returned to Taos not as a prodigal, but as a woman forged in fire, short hair, a tattoo of a blooming yucca on her collarbone, portfolio bursting with pieces that had won her a residency in Brooklyn. The town hadn't changed. Adobe facades baking under relentless sun, the missions bells calling the faithful to prayer. But Camilla had. At 45, her once vibrant curls were streaked with silver, her eyes shadowed by something deeper than fatigue. They reunited at the casita, the air thick with the scent of fresh tortillas. Camilla enveloped her in a hug that lasted too long, murmuring, "You've become such a force, Belle." Over coffee on the porch, the truth spilled, not in accusations but in quiet admissions. "I saw you that night in the confessional. With Elena." Camilla's cup trembled, coffee sloshing like tears. "You were 13. God forgive me for letting you carry that." Belle reached across the table, her hand covering Camilla's. "It wasn't a burden, Mama. It was beautiful. Why hide it?" Camilla's laugh was bitter, wind-scoured. "Because the church doesn't saint women who love like that. They bury us." For the first time, Belle saw the fracture lines. The woman who'd given everything to a faith that demanded her erasure. That summer stretched lazy and laden, a fragile truce. Belle helped at the parish garden, weeding rows of chiles while Camilla led Bible studies with renewed fervor. Elena returned for a visit, thinner, her hair a crown of white, but the spark between them flickered like embers under ash. Belle watched them share a stolen walk by the acequia, hands brushing, and felt a swell of something fierce. Not jealousy but a longing to free them. Yet freedom in Taos came at a cost. The bishop's scrutiny lingered, old letters resurfacing like ghosts. And Belle's own heart, restless as the desert wind, began to wander toward uncharted canyons. The Rio Grande Gorge called to Belle like a siren's song that fall, its jagged depths a mirror to the chasms opening in her life. At 25, she was no longer the girl who'd fled Taos for city lights. She was an artist with a name whispered in galleries from Santa Fe to Soho, her work, raw explorations of queer sainthood, hanging in a solo show at the Harwood Museum. But success tasted like dust without roots. Returning full-time to care for Camilla, whose sabbatical had stretched into indefinite exile, Belle rented a tiny adobe studio overlooking the gorge, its walls papered with sketches of fractured halos. Camilla, stripped of her title but not her spirit, volunteered at the local women's shelter, her days filled with counseling survivors of domestic storms. "The church may have cast me out," she'd say with a wry smile over evening pozole, "but God's work doesn't stop at the altar." Belle admired her resilience, the way she wove faith and doubt into a tapestry of quiet rebellion. But admiration couldn't erase the growing rift. Camilla's devotion to the institution that betrayed her clashed with Belle's outright rejection of it. Enter Leah Torres, the geologist who'd blown into Taos like a haboob, fierce, unapologetic, with sun-bleached hair tied in a bandana and calloused hands that mapped fault lines for the Bureau of Land Management. They met at a queer open mic night in the town's lone dive bar, El Toro Loco, where Belle read a poem about loving in the margins. Leah, nursing a Tecate, cornered her afterward. "That line about saints in drag? Hit me like a rock slide. I'm Leah, destroyer of heteronormativity, one seismic survey at a time." Their first date was a hike into the gorge, boots crunching basalt under a sky bruised purple by monsoon clouds. Leah talked fast, about plate tectonics and the arrogance of borders, her voice a rumble that matched the river below. Belle, usually guarded, found herself spilling stories of confessional eavesdropping and adopted sainthood. "My mom's a ghost of who she was," she admitted, skipping a stone across the churning water. "Loves the church more than she loves herself." Leah's hand found hers, warm and steady. "Then teach her to love the mess. That's what queers do best." What began as sparks ignited into something deeper, a romance carved from canyon echoes. Leah moved into Belle's studio after 2 months, her truck bed spilling with rock hammers and topo maps. Mornings blurred into shared canvases. Leah posing nude against the window, her body a landscape of curves and scars from fieldwork falls, while Belle painted her in oils, capturing the freckles like constellations. Nights were tangled sheets and whispered vulnerabilities, Leah's fingers tracing Belle's yucca tattoo as she confessed her own ghosts. A conservative upbringing in Lubbock, a coming out that cost her a brother's wedding invite. Camilla welcomed Leah with cautious warmth, frying empanadas for Sunday brunches and asking polite questions about fault lines. "She sees you, Belle," Camilla said one afternoon, shelling piñon nuts on the porch. "That's rarer than gold in these hills." But beneath the approval lurked unease. Leah's atheism was a live wire, her jokes about Sky Daddy landing like grenades at family rosaries. Though Camilla no longer led them, the habit died hard. The conflict simmered until Thanksgiving, when Elena returned for good, fleeing Santa Fe's rising rents for a job at the clinic. Her arrival was a quiet earthquake, a potluck invite, then coffee with Camilla that stretched into hours. Belle watched from the kitchen window as they sat on the casita's bench, heads bent close, Elena's hand on Camilla's knee, a gesture so intimate it stole the air from the room. Leah, chopping onions beside her, muttered, "Your mom's got unfinished business. You gonna play referee forever?" Belle's reply was a knife's edge. "It's not my story to finish." But it was, and the weight pressed harder. That night, after turkey and tamales, Leah pulled her onto the studio's sagging couch, the gorge winds rattling the panes. "Marry me," she said, "not with a ring but a pocketknife carved heart of agate. Let's build something that doesn't crumble." Belle's yes was a sob, joy laced with terror. How could she vow forever when home was a house of half-truths? Word spread through Taos like wildfire through Piñon. Sister Camilla's old flame back in town, the adopted daughter shacking up with a heathen scientist. The bishop, sensing scandal, summoned Camilla to a pastoral review in Santa Fe. She returned hollow-eyed, clutching a manila envelope of concerns. "They want my resignation, formal, public. For the good of the flock." Belle exploded, pacing the kitchen like a caged javelina. "The flock? They've been fleecing you for years. Elena loves you. Why can't that be enough?" Camilla's voice broke like dry earth. "Because it's not just love, Belle. It's the life I chose, the vows, the calling." Leah, arriving with takeout burritos, caught the tail end and laid it bare. Bullshit. It's fear. You're scared of losing the halo more than losing her. The room went still, Camilla's face paling to chalk. She fled to her room, door clicking shut like a confessional latch. Belle cornered Leah later, fury boiling. You had no right. Leah's eyes flashed. Someone had to say it. You're enabling her martyrdom. The argument escalated, words like boulders tumbling. Belle accusing Leah of bulldozing sacred ground. Leah firing back that Belle's loyalty was a chain, not love. By dawn, Leah packed a bag, her truck kicking gravel as she headed to a survey site in the Hemes. Call when you're done playing savior, she texted, the words a bruise on Belle's screen. Alone, Belle drove to Elena's rented casita on the outskirts, the gorge yawning beside the road like an open wound. Elena answered in a robe, hair damp from a shower, her eyes red-rimmed. She's breaking, you know, Belle said, stepping inside without invitation. The living room smelled of sage and sorrow, photos of lost husbands and children lining the mantel. Elena poured tea with shaking hands. Camilla's always been her own worst inquisitor. But I won't beg. They talked until midnight, about stolen kisses in the church basement, letters burned in the fireplace, the ache of loving across chasms of doctrine. You remind me of her at your age, Elena said softly, touching Belle's cheek. Fierce. Unbending. Belle left with a resolve hardening like cooling lava. She would force the truth into the light, or watch it consume them all. But truths in Taos had teeth. The next parish council meeting loomed, a powder keg where Camilla's fate would be sealed. December's chill bit deep into Taos's bones, frosting the adobe walls and turning the acequias to ice ribbons. The parish hall buzzed with the low hum of anticipation for the council meeting, a rubber stamp affair, or so the elders thought, to address recent distractions with grace. Camilla dressed in her Sunday best. A modest navy dress, silver cross gleaming at her throat, her hair coiled like a crown of thorns. Belle drove her there in silence, the Ford's heater wheezing defiance against the cold. You don't have to speak, Camilla murmured, gaze fixed on the passing pignons. Belle gripped the wheel tighter. But I will. The hall was a sea of familiar faces. Father Ortiz, his jowls quivering with rehearsed compassion. Mrs. Herrera, the choir director who'd once slipped Belle extra communion wafers. The bishop's proxy, a stern deacon from Albuquerque with eyes like polished obsidian. Elena sat in the back row, unobtrusive in a wool shawl, her presence a quiet rebellion. Leah hadn't returned calls, her absence a hollow in Belle's chest, but a text from the Hemes, watching from afar. You've got this, bolstered her like rebar in concrete. Camilla's statement was a masterclass in deflection. Gratitude for years of service, a nod to personal reflections on her path forward. The council murmured approval, pens scratching notes of absolution. Then Belle stood, her voice cutting through the room like a canyon wind. With respect, this isn't reflection, it's erasure. Head swiveled, whispers rippling. She laid it bare. The confessional whispers, the burned letters, the love Camilla had starved for the sake of a collar that choked her. You call her a saint for her silence. But saints don't hide. They illuminate. Chaos erupted. Father Ortiz sputtered about decorum. Mrs. Herrera gasped into her handkerchief. The deacon's face hardened to stone. This is calumny, young lady. Slander against a devoted servant. Elena rose then, her voice steady as the Rios flow. Not slander. Truth. I've loved her for 20 years, in shadows, because you demanded it. The room fractured. Some parishioners nodding in tearful solidarity, others crossing themselves against the devil's work. Camilla sat frozen, her cross clutched like a lifeline, eyes locked on Belle with a mix of pride and terror. As the meeting dissolved into shouts, she fled to the vestibule, Belle and Elena trailing. Outside, snow flurried soft and unforgiving. Why? Camilla whispered, turning on Belle. You've ruined everything. Belle's heart splintered. No, mama. I freed you. The betrayal came swift as a flash flood. By morning, the Taos News ran a front-page story. Parish rocked by scandal. Sister Camilla accused of immoral conduct. Fed by leaks from the deacon's camp. Phone lines jammed at the shelter, donors withdrawing, whispers turning to outright shunning. Camilla barricaded herself in the casita. Rosary beads clicking like gunfire in the dark. Belle fielded the calls. Furious congregants demanding repentance, old friends offering asylum in Denver. Elena visited nightly, their hands entwined across the kitchen table, but Camilla pulled away each time, murmuring, "Not like this. Not in disgrace." Belle's own world crumbled in tandem. Her residency offer from Brooklyn evaporated, galleries wary of controversy, and Leah's truck finally rumbled back into the driveway, but not for reconciliation. "I can't watch you bleed for this," Leah said, duffel slung over her shoulder. "You're choosing her chains over us." Belle begged, raw and desperate. "Help me break them." But Leah's kiss was goodbye, tasting of salt and seismic finality. "Love isn't a rescue mission, Belle. It's mutual ground." She drove off toward new digs in Flagstaff, leaving Belle with canvases half-finished and a heart mapped in fault lines. Despair settled like ash after a wildfire. Belle took to long walks in the gorge, the river's roar drowning her sobs. At 25 she torched her mother's legacy, her lover's trust, her own fragile peace. One evening, sketching by the bridge, she overheard park rangers gossiping. "That Ruiz woman? Always knew she was too good to be true." The words lodged like shards. Was this the truth she'd unearthed? Not love but isolation. Camilla found her there at dusk, bundled in a serape against the bite. "I was wrong to let you carry it alone," she said, sitting on the cold rock. For the first time she spoke Elena's name without flinching. The stolen weekends in Ubiquitous, the poems hidden in Bible margins. "I thought sacrifice made me holy, but it just made me hollow." Tears froze on her cheeks. Belle leaned into her, the gorge echoing their shared silence. "Then let's fill it. Together." Rebuilding began in fragments. A joint letter to the parish, not apology but affirmation. "We are women of faith, loving as God made us." Elena moved in, her roses transplanted to the casita's yard, blooming defiant against the frost. Belle's art surged anew. Exhibits in Santa Fe drawing crowds who saw not scandal, but salvation in the strokes. Leah sent postcards from Arizona, edges softening. "Heard about the show. Proud of your fault lines." But peace was tentative, the church's shadow long. Whispers persisted, and a diocesan inquiry loomed, threatening excommunication. As winter deepened, Belle wondered if truth was a bridge or a brink. Spring thawed Taos reluctantly, melting snow into mud that sucked at boots and soles alike. The casita transformed under Elena's touch. Shelves lined with herbal teas from her clinic halls, laughter bubbling from the kitchen where she and Camilla experimented with paella recipes, infusing saffron into the air like golden prayers. Belle watched from her studio window, brush paused midstroke, a pang twisting her gut. Not envy but the ache of witness. At 25, she'd become the guardian of their fragile Eden. Fielding hate mail scrawled with Bible verses and juggling gig offers that demanded she distance from the family drama. The diocesan inquiry arrived like a summons from the Inquisition. A 3-day hearing in Albuquerque, presided over by a panel of stone-faced clerics. Camilla prepared with the fervor of a novena, scripting testimonies that balanced contrition with quiet defiance. "I'll fall on my sword if it spares you," she told Belle one night. The three of them huddled by the fireplace, flames dancing shadows on their faces. Elena squeezed her hand. "No swords. We've hidden long enough." Belle nodded but sleep evaded her. Dreams replaying the confessional doors slam. Albuquerque's archdiocesan offices loomed brutalist and cold, a far cry from Taos's warm earth tones. Belle sat in the gallery, Elena beside her, as Camilla took the stand. The questions were scalpels, timelines of inappropriate attachments, interpretations of vows, the scandal's impact on the faithful. Camilla answered with measured grace, admitting love, denying deceit, her voice steady until the deacon pressed. "And your daughter? Did she fabricate to protect you?" Camilla's eyes met Belle's across the room, fierce as a mother's vow. She spoke truth, as I should have. The panel recessed, but the verdict leaked via sympathetic whispers. Suspension pending repentance, a public recantation demanded. Driving home through the turquoise trail's sagebrush, silence reigned until Elena shattered it. "We're done, Camilla. No more altars." Camilla's hands trembled on the wheel. "It's all I know," Belle from the back seat interjected. "Then learn. Like I did." Back in Taos, fracture lines widened. Parishioners splintered. some forming a rogue prayer circle in the casitas yard. Candles flickering against picket signs from fundamentalists decrying sodomite saints. Belle's phone buzzed with interview requests. NPR wanting her queer Catholic awakening. Local rags twisting it into tabloid fodder. She poured it into art. A massive triptych unveiled at the Taos Art Museum. Camilla as a veiled Madonna cradling Elena's hand. Belle as the thorn-crowned child reaching for light. Critics hailed it a desert manifesto. But the backlash stung. Eggs splattered on the studio door. Anonymous calls hissing heretic. Leah's return was a monsoon mercy. She appeared unannounced in May. Dust caked from a dig in the Chihuahuan desert. A six-pack of Negro Modelo in hand. "Missed your stubborn ass," she said, pulling Belle into a kiss that tasted of adventure and amends. They rebuilt slow. Canyon picnics where Leah taught her to read Rock Strata. Nights debating theology over stargazing. Leah's skepticism softening to curiosity under Belle's passionate defenses. "Faith's like a fault," Leah conceded once, tracing Belle's palm. "Beautiful when it shifts." Camilla warmed to her. The four of them forging an uneasy family over backyard barbecues. Green chili smoke curling skyward. But the recantation deadline loomed June 15th, the Feast of the Sacred Heart. Camilla agonized, pacing the porch at dawn. Rosary forgotten in her pocket. "If I refuse, they take everything. My pension, my name in the annals." Elena's ultimatum came gentle but iron. "Then take me instead." That night she proposed, not with fanfare, but a simple gold band etched with roses, slipped onto Camilla's finger by firelight. "Marry me in the eyes of whoever matters. Or not at all." Belle officiated the elopement 2 days later, a sunset ceremony by the gorge. Wildflowers woven into Elena's hair. Leah strumming a guitar to folksy covers of Ave Maria. Vows exchanged in Spanglish, laughter mingling with the river's roar. "I choose you, flaws and all," Camilla said, voice breaking. Belle's toast was simple. "To truths that set us free, even when they scar." The refusal letter to the diocese was a collective act. Camilla's signature, Elena's witness, Belle's postscript poem. Backlash crested. A media circus defrocking decree, but so did support. Queer Catholics from coast to coast, artists mounting solidarity shows, even Father Ortiz slipping a note. "You were always the holiest among us." Yet betrayal's shadow lingered. In July, an old parish ledger surfaced, forged? Leaked? Detailing emoluments Camilla allegedly skimmed for Elena's illicit support. The accusation gutted her. Not just sin but theft. Investigators swarmed the casita, combing files while Camilla wept in the garden, roses wilting under the heat. Belle, raging, drove to confront the deacon in his lavish rectory. "This is vengeance, not justice." He smiled thinly. "The church protects its own." Exile deepened. Elena quit the clinic amid whispers. Camilla's shelter funding dried up. They scraped by on Belle's commissions and Leah's fieldwork pay. The casita feeling more bunker than home. Nights Belle lay awake beside Leah. The woman's steady breaths a tether, wondering if freedom was worth the famine. The climax brewed in August, a heat wave cracking the earth. An anonymous tip led to a raid, not on funds but hearts. Hidden journals Camilla had kept, pages of love letters to Elena spanning decades. Seized as evidence, they hit the tabloids. Nun's secret diary. Blasphemy or ballot? The town divided, pickets clashing at the mission steps. Belle, shielding Camilla from flashes, felt the noose tighten. In the gorge's depths she confronted her own betrayal. Had her hook torn too deep, unraveling not just lies but lives? Autumn painted Taos in ochre and rust, leaves drifting like confetti from a bitter parade. The journal's publication was a crucifixion. Excerpts splashed across national news, twisting tender words, "Your touch is my Eucharist," into lurid headlines. Camilla retreated fully, a wraith in the casita. Her once commanding presence shrunk to whispers over tea. Elena anchored her with fierce practicality, lining up counseling gigs in virtual spaces, but the strain etched lines around her eyes. Belle and Leah turned the studio into a war room. Petitions to the ACLU for defamation suits. Crowdfunding for legal fees that poured in from unlikely allies. Drag queens in Provincetown, Latino theologians in LA. Belle's art became activism, a mural on the mission's outer wall, commissioned defiantly by progressive council members, depicting intertwined hands breaking chains, Saints with lovers' gazes. Vandals struck twice, paint dripping like blood. But each restoration drew crowds. Chants of amor, yes, amor echoing off the adobe. Leah, ever the geologist, mapped their strategy. We're shifting the bedrock. Slow but seismic. The High Court came unbidden, in the form of a National Catholic Synod on Inclusion, spotlighting Taos as case study. Reporters swarmed, but Camilla's testimony, delivered via live stream from the casita, Elena's hand in hers, resonated like a vesper bell. I served with my whole heart, she said, voice steady for the first time in months. But love demanded more. If that's sin, then sin is holy. Belle watched from the wings, tears blurring the screen, pride swelling like monsoon clouds. Betrayal's final twist arrived via postmark. A letter from Father Ortiz, enclosing a faded photo, Camilla and Elena, young and radiant at a 1990s parish picnic, arms linked. I knew, he confessed. And I said nothing. Forgive an old coward. The revelation cracked Camilla open. Not just church hypocrisy, but personal complicity from those she trusted most. She burned the photo in the fireplace that night, ashes swirling up the chimney like released spirits. No more altars, she echoed Elena's words, finally free. Winter brought healing's hesitant bloom. The diocese settled quietly, retractions, a modest restitution, while the synod voted reforms, crediting the Taos martyrs. Camilla founded a lay ministry for queer Catholics, meetings in the casita's yard under string lights, stories shared like loaves and fishes. Elena thrived as director, her nursing skills mending emotional wounds. Belle's career crested. A MacArthur grant for narratives of sacred deviance, funding a Taos artist collective that lifted others from the margins. Camilla walked Belle down the aisle, Elena on her arm, both radiant in linen suits. You taught me to love without apology, Belle whispered, squeezing her mother's hand. Camilla's eyes shimmered. And you, me Santa, showed me grace. Years later at 30, Belle stood in that same courtyard, easel before her, painting the scene. Camilla and Elena gray-haired and entwined on a bench, laughter lines mapping their endurance. The church had recast her mother not as saint but elder, invited back for guest sermons on radical love. Taos had shifted too. Pride flags on adobe porches, queer youth groups in the hall. The truth Belle knew at 13 hadn't destroyed, it had discipled. In the desert's harsh mercy, love, flawed, fierce, proved the ultimate revelation. And in its light they all walked whole.